Welcome to PsychicBent. My name is Carrie.
And I'm Kim. We are two sisters wanting to help other psychics learn and grow in their abilities and to help educate about spirits, angels, and everything psychic.
Welcome back to PsychicBent, everyone. We sure hope you enjoyed our episode last week where we went over a listener's email and discussed it in length, and also the discussion on psychic symbols. I really had fun with that one. How about you, Carrie?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think symbols are very interesting.
Oh, well, they show up everywhere. It's just amazing how they're
Yes.
intertwined with everything that you do, you know?
Yep.
So this week we've decided that we're going to cover, and I know we've promised it on a couple other episodes, but we will be covering aphantasia. And aphantasia is a condition that is, it's kind of like your personality, except it involves the ability not to see images in your mind, which I find that fascinating. You know, it's like whenever you hear people say that they don't ever dream, different things like that. It's like, really? How is that? You know? But that's what this is. I know Carrie will go into more detail with this, but it's just the not being able to get that picture in your head like a lot of us can. Carrie, why don't you go ahead and cover that for us?
Okay.
In better detail than what I did.
All right. Well, aphantasia is not common. I think 1 to 4% of the population actually suffers from aphantasia. Where this can be an issue if you're psychic, and where it's kind of hard for other psychics to understand it, because if you're like very clairvoyant, that's your strong clair, and you see things all the time. Well, if you're aphantasia, you can't see anything in your third eye. Your mind's eye cannot see any visuals. Now, that doesn't mean you can't dream, but it's harder for you to remember those dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And, just like if you do a guided meditation and you try and you can just never visualize what they're trying to ask you to visualize. Like, well, picture yourself along a lake, everything's green and blah, 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 and you can't see it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then you may have aphantasia, because it is the inability to see anything visually in your mind's eye, which can be very frustrating if you're trying to develop your psychic senses and you don't understand why my clairvoyance isn't coming through, or why is this meditation not working for me.
Oh, true. And it could also affect other practices that you may be trying to do. Like, I know that there are people out there that practice witchcraft, paganism and such, and they are very dedicated to seeing the mind's eye, to using the visualization techniques. That is that's what they rely on, depend on. But I know that they have to also try to work on something else, I assume.
Well, if your mental imaging isn't working because you have aphantasia, then you need to work more on your clairsentient clair, clear knowing. Work on your intuition, and try not to focus on what you can't do. Because as a psychic, when you're first walking down the path, what's everybody saying? Meditate, which we do, but you can meditate without doing a guided meditation where it's visualizing. And you may have to adjust or adapt your psychic development based on whether or not you have aphantasia or not. Now, there of course are signs of aphantasia. Like if you want to, you take a moment to think of a friend or a family member, and try to imagine their face in your mind. How clearly you can see their features, face, hair, and shape. How clearly can you picture their characteristic movements and gestures, and how vividly you can picture that person's clothing. And if you struggle with your responses to any of those questions, you might have some degree of aphantasia. So you might see some of it, but not all of it. Okay, well, you might have a little bit of aphantasia.
Mm-hmm.
And evidently aphantasia and autism go well together too. I don't know why, because they've not done a lot of research and study on what causes aphantasia.
Right.
So there's really not a lot of background. But I mean, it was described as early in the 1800s, of a lack of mental imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Considering what they had available in the 1880s, that's really interesting that they were able to even come up with this phenomena.
Yeah, right. Because, like I said earlier, people that don't remember their dreams, I mean, I thought everybody remembered their dreams because I do.
Yes. And when you encounter someone that goes, I know someone that was there, I never remember my dreams. I'm like, how do you not remember your dreams?
Right. Or the conversations that you have in your head.
Yeah.
Like, I always have conversations with myself. Other people don't. They just don't. So it's kind of the same concept.
Yeah. And if your main clairvoyance, well, you've been dealing with clairvoyance all your life, so you can't even visualize, or not visualize, but imagine not being able to do it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But there are those that, now you can be psychic and still have aphantasia. It's just you need to focus developing the muscles that you can actually utilize, like the clear knowing, going with your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you are trying to focus so much on why can't I do this guided meditation where I'm supposed to visualize stuff, why can't I do these exercises for clairvoyance and I'm still not visualizing stuff? And I think if you put too much pressure on that, what's going to happen to your abilities?
Well, they're going to shut down because your frustration's there. It's going to shut down.
Yeah, exactly. And your development is going to stagnate because you're focusing on well, you know what, maybe I'm not psychic. Maybe I just thought was getting these hits, and you're just totally going to be doubting your abilities, and therefore your abilities aren't going to shine through.
Right.
So we kind of thought this was a very important, topic. I had not come across this topic before. And of course, I was listening to a podcast that I don't normally listen to. And the first thing they talked about was aphantasia. And I'm like, what the heck's that? Because as someone who does get clairvoyant hits, and as someone who does vivid dreaming,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of like, I don't understand that. And it's like, well, that could be very frustrating for a developing psychic who doesn't understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. Totally understand where that could be very, very frustrating because, we've given so many different guided meditations ourselves on the podcast throughout the 85 episodes or however many we've done so far. And it never even occurred to me, as you, that somebody can't do it, and how frustrating that must be. Yep, couldn't even imagine that. But then what do we do if that is the case?
Yeah, well, if that is the case, then you need to focus on what you can do and what you can develop. Because like with anything, any negative energy that you start to have about something, then you're drawing more negative energy to you. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not psychic, I thought I was, you have all that self-doubt. And that self-doubt is going to bring more self-doubt. It's lowering your vibration. And you're going to draw more of that energy you're trying not to have towards you, which gives you more confusion, makes you feel, your self-worth is down.
Inadequate and unworthy.
And
that's what popped into my
yes,
head.
yes. And this is a condition that they don't know what causes it. Obviously, it has something to do with something in your brain, I would think, because if autism is linked with some aphantasia as well, and I'm not saying if you have aphantasia, you're autistic, but that would be like something in your mind or your brain that is keeping these imageries from happening. So if you have or you suspect, they've got the test, I read one article, well, here's the test on Facebook. I'm like, okay, you lost me right there because, just because it's a test on Facebook doesn't mean you should click that link.
True.
But you yourself, if you do an experiment with, okay, I'm going to try to visualize this person, look at the picture, analyze the picture, close your eyes and try to visualize. If nothing comes, cut yourself some slack because that's not your gifts. So clairvoyant is not going to be your gift because, we talked about strengthening the psychic muscles. And if you don't have aphantasia, you can develop your clairvoyant muscle. But if you do not, then it's a time to sit down and do a strategic, okay, what other clairs resonate with me. Yeah, everybody wants to be clairvoyant. Everybody cannot be clairvoyant because some of your spidey senses, so to speak, or others are stronger than clairvoyance. Not everybody has strong clairvoyance tendencies, even though you do the exercises to develop it if you're able to visualize. But sometimes it's not meant to be your strongest clair, because, spirit has other intentions for your development and your abilities. So I think if you feel you have aphantasia, I would definitely research it. There's a lot of information that talks about it. Unfortunately, not a lot of research has been done about it. So it's kind of one of those things where, you know what, it's okay if you can't do a guided meditation that involves using clairvoyance or visualization. So that means you just find a meditation that resonates with what you can do. And I think if you keep focusing on, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, well, now you know why you can't do it. Mm-hmm. If you're one of those people that has been maybe getting frustrated with trying to develop this clarity, why is this not working? And, it does get frustrating when you're trying to practice on something and it's not going the way you think it should. We've all had that moment.
Yeah.
When you say, Kim, that you've had that, well, why is this not working?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And sometimes it's not working because you're not in a point in your development that you're ready for that.
Yeah. A good analogy that I came across whenever I was doing my research on it is, when someone has their eyesight, they don't have their eyesight anymore, or they've been born where they can't hear, your other senses take over for those disabilities that you may have. If you can't see, then your sense of touch, smell, taste, hearing all become more, you depend on those so much more to be able to see. They help you see and they become stronger. And it's the same thing if you can't hear, then it's your eyes and your smell and your taste and your feel as well allow you to be able to hear through those other senses. So if you find that you can't do the visualization, then your other senses should become stronger, and then you can find which one works best for you for doing that type of imagery instead of it being through your mind's eye and the images in your head. Then you can develop your other senses to help you see what it is that you're trying to see. Because when you see something visually and you're trying to put it to memory, you do get the energy off of it. You feel the energy off of it. You see the colors, the smell, you feel it. You use all your other senses, and that's that picture for you. It may be how that smells. It may be you're smelling a rainy day smell in your head, wet concrete. Well, that's a rain that's hit the concrete. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you keep in mind that if you have aphantasia, you can still live a very successful life. You can still be a very successful psychic. Mm-hmm. Just using your other tools, your other gifts.
Right.
Your other clair muscles. And I think which is disturbing is the lack of research. Yes, they have a name for it, but the lack of research that's been done. And I think I have found like 3 different researches for this. 3. None of them in the United States. We've got different countries. I just felt it was what was important about this episode was to not, whether you have aphantasia or not, if you're trying to develop something with your abilities and you feel like you're hitting a brick wall, I think it's time to just step away from what you're trying to push and just have a quiet mindfulness session with yourself, asking Spirit to just show you what it is you're really supposed to be focusing on. Because I think we get an idea in our head, and we do this as humans because, we're inundated with influencers, TV, social media. we get a certain idea that we've picked up how something is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that's how it's supposed to be for you. And as psychics, we do live a little different lifestyle than most. When you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I had a friend of mine that she went through a not very nice breakup. The guy ghosted her. It's one of those situations where, why would you even do it? But okay, it happened. And she's like, I wanted me to do a reading. Well, she's my friend. I've known for, 8 years. I can't do a reading on someone that close
Mm-hmm.
because I know them,
Right.
and so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get you in touch with my psychic who does the readings for me, and you go from there. And she did this because she didn't know she was an empath, and she hasn't always been open to, she used to think that the psychic stuff was junk.
Right.
And so when she first approached me about a tarot reading, I thought, I didn't think you believed in that. Oh, well, yeah, I do. I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, I really don't think I can do this for you because, I can do the cards, but I know the backstory. Is that going to make your reading?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because ego wants to wrestle in on this,
Yep.
And so she set up the appointment, and she wanted to know about this particular situation because, if you've never had someone ghost you, I'm happy for you, because it's one of those situations with someone who's going to ghost you, and we've talked about this in other episodes, where they're like all into you, and they're like poof, gone.
Yeah, because it could be a friend too, not just a
Yeah,
partner or anything like that.
yeah. It's just someone who you're connected with. You thought it's like either a good friend or a love or whatever, going great, making plans to do stuff, and all of a sudden, poof. Which I feel that's a narcissistic person who does that because they're getting something out of it.
Well, it's a narcissistic trait, not just a narcissist, but it is
Yeah.
a trait of an.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and where I'm going with this story is how we get something in our mind that this is how it's supposed to be. I'm going to be clairvoyant. Well, you know what? If I have aphantasia, I'm not going to be clairvoyant. Well, you have to cut yourself some slack. Well, she wanted to talk about her love life. And everything that the psychic was getting had nothing to do with her love life except for one item where she talked to her about you care too much for people and you don't set up boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And the last romantic involvement you had, with this one person, you should have cut them loose a long time ago, but you didn't because you were trying to fix them. Which is something that we do as empaths.
Yes, we do.
That's what we do. And she was really floored because that was her first actual psychic reading. And she's like, oh my gosh, she was so spot on, but she didn't talk about my love life. And I'm like, because there was nothing to tell you about your love life. And I said, were you disappointed? She goes, oh no, she talked about my mother, my father. She started out with something that my dad would always say that nobody else knew. And I said, well, that's how spirit shows you that she's in tune. Most psychics prior to an online or phone, reading, meditate on that person, prior to the appointment time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where spirit's kind of giving you all this is what we're going to talk about stuff. This is what needs to be said, so when you get on the phone, you've already got that. This is where we're going here, and I'm like, well, she didn't talk about that because there's nothing to say.
Yep.
But she was open to it because of the other information she gleaned. It wasn't the information she was looking for, what she thought she was going to get. She wanted some definite answers on this relationship, which is where we kind of do with our psychic abilities. I'm going to be clairvoyant. That's going to be my super strength right there. That's my power right there, clairvoyancy. Well, now you've got, you didn't know it, but you have aphantasia. Because, when you have something like this, you don't know it's different from everybody else until you start to do meditation work.
Right.
Or exercises to develop your third eye, your mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get frustrated and start putting up all these roadblocks on yourself when it's something like, well, okay, this is just how you are, embrace it, love it, this is it. But what can you do? And you probably, if you have aphantasia, probably a very strong intuitive base
Yeah, I could see that.
where you're getting your psychic hits that way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Right.
because your other senses are kicking it up. You may be one of those that has the taste sensation where you can get your readings that way. So it's kind of, we've talked about this before as having grace with yourself
Mm-hmm.
with any of your developments. And if you're one of the 4% of, the population out there that has this, for one, I think it's kind of interesting on how you're going to need to research and see, well, put the clairvoyant Claire in the box, and let's go to the next Claire that resonates with you, because that Claire probably wasn't resonating with you, but that's the most Claire everybody knows.
Right. The one that's most glorified and everything that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. On TV or whatever, your clairvoyance. They never talk about the other clairs, and you have multiple clairs working for you at one time. So this is all about having to personalize your development. So whether or not you got aphantasia or not, you do need to personalize your development and sit down and okay, meditate, use your pendulum or whatever tool. And I think with aphantasia, a tool would kind of be more reassuring for you to give you affirmation on the hits you're getting, whether it's a pendulum, or a tarot deck or whatever you're drawn to. But because, you can't do the visualization, well, you've got your pendulum, you've got other types of meditation you can do. And I think it's just going to give a different curve on your development. And I think you could be a very, very good psychic without having clairvoyance.
Oh, definitely. You mentioned the pendulums. I also read that you can use like tarot or runes to receive your intuitive messages, and also psychometry, where you hold objects and try to feel their history or energy. That's where you're starting to use your other senses when you do the psychometry. What about automatic writing? That should also be able to help someone that doesn't have the visualization, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, because automatic writing has nothing to do with visualization.
Mm-hmm.
It is what you're hearing. The words that you're hearing, you're writing down.
Yeah.
So that has, so that's nothing with clairvoyance. So you're not seeing pictures or imprints, but you're hearing, and you're going to be more open to hear what Spirit's trying to tell you. I mean, I've done, with a lot of the readings, I don't always get clairvoyant hits in my readings. I get something talking, I get words.
Mm-hmm.
So automatic writing would be perfect to just sit there, because what do you first do? You clear your mind. Well, if you've got aphantasia, that's not going to be difficult to have no visuals popping in. You just got to clear your mind clutter.
Yeah, the clutter
that we all have.
Yeah, that talking and stuff that you already do.
Yeah. You got to quiet your mind. And, of course, before any exercise, you should, meditate to a safe environment, cleanse your space, ask for protection, and then just sit there. And what I've done is write my questions on the paper and then wait. Because if aphantasia, you may not feel that, I don't know if you have aphantasia, if it's hard to ask the questions in your mind. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you still could, because it's not visualization. But if you've tried that and you don't feel it's working, then write it down on the paper that you're going to be writing on. Because automatic writing, you sit there with your eyes closed, you've got a pen in your hand, you've got a blank sheet of paper in front of you, and you're just going to write whatever you hear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, so I think that if you have aphantasia, that automatic writing would probably be a very good way of developing your other psychic senses.
Yeah.
And I think that would make your relationship with Spirit, I think, a little stronger, because there's more communication going on between the two versus your mind's eye and seeing things. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
Yeah, it feels like that would be more of a personal bond that you're developing with Spirit than what you would get with
Yeah.
the visual. Makes sense.
And I know as humans, we always want what we can't have. But I really want to be clairvoyant. That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know what? That's not a gift that's been given to you, because you have other gifts that are more important and are to be developed. So sometimes we have to just kind of step away from what we want. And whether you have aphantasia or not, I think it's a big psychic block. Is this isn't what I want. Well, but what you want isn't necessarily how you're supposed to be, because it may not be your path that Spirit wants you on.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely.
So sometimes we have to put ego aside, because it's not going to be like on TV, and you can't always control the hits. Someone might want a psychic reading from you and you get nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe that person isn't ready to hear the answer.
Yeah. And I think it's really good to pay attention to all the other clairs that are there, that you have, that you're developing, and don't just put all your eggs in one basket. Make certain you are working with your other senses, because sometimes it could just be that little scent, that little smell, that little taste you get in your mouth. That's going to be a symbol of something. That's going to be a message when you are giving a reading. It's not just the image in your head. It's not just the voice that you hear. You could be getting that by any clair. You could be receiving a hit, and you don't want to miss that hit or that message just because it's not the one you think you should be developing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or you're not receiving it the way you want to receive it.
Yeah.
So then you're not putting any thought into what's actually happening.
Right. Because you could be getting the message in several different ways at one time, and it makes it a better, clearer, quote unquote, picture, even though you're may not be receiving that image due to the aphantasia. But by getting multiple from the different senses at one time, the different clairs at one time, it helps to make that message clearer. It clarifies it to you. I don't know. I know what I'm trying to say. Don't know if it's coming out, but I mean, it enhances that message because you're getting all of the different types of sensations. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And, like that last episode, which was about psychic symbols. Well, you're not going to see psychic symbols with this, but you might hear or feel certain things. Like you said, a sense of smell, something, when you may have when I smell this actually means that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting your psychic symbols in a different way.
Right. As we've talked about I know we've talked about it in many episodes, but whenever at a certain time you could smell hot chocolate, it reminds me of Grandma's hot chocolate. Warm, comforting, that's what it means to me. Home, safety. So that could be if I'm getting that getting that hit somewhere, that could be a message for somebody else for those reasons. You're in a safe part in your life. You're, whatever your home, you're where you need to be, or you're where you're supposed to be. That could be that kind of a message for somebody, but I got that just because of that smell instead of getting a picture of a, steaming mug of hot chocolate with marshmallows and such on top, or whipped cream.
Yeah, I mean, and we always talk about you should go with what resonates you development-wise. And I think if you have aphantasia, you're going to really need to go with what resonates you, because you're getting multiple, like, you smell hot chocolate and you're talking to someone, and hot chocolate to you means grandma.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say to that person, I don't know why, but I'm smelling hot cocoa or hot chocolate, what does that mean to you? And see what it actually means to them.
Right.
So what thought process, or what does it mean to them? But also keep in mind, if you're giving a reading and that person has aphantasia, you may have to rely more on the words you're hearing from spirit versus imagery. If you've got someone you say, I see this, and they're not reacting to it, it may not be that your hit is wrong. It might be that this person actually has aphantasia. And so they can't visualize what you're saying. So so you may have to adjust your reading.
But they would still have a memory of that, though.
They just can't visualize that memory.
But you're describing that memory.
Right. Well, because with aphantasia, it's difficult for them to actually visualize a loved one that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
They can't visualize the features of that person. Sometimes in your reading, you may have to, if you're noticing that you're giving a visualization and they're not reacting to it, then you may have to, I smell cocoa. Can you smell cocoa? You just may have to change your reading a little bit. And you may have to ask them, can you visualize? Because if you're getting all these hits and they're acting like, they're either a really huge doubter and they're just messing with you, or because people do that,
Yeah.
or they can't visualize. And if you're a person who is using your third eye all the time, then there's going to be a problem with the reading here, because you're doing everything your third eye way and you're describing everything third eye way, where you may have to adjust your reading to, more of an intuitive reading versus a clairvoyant reading. You may have to shift how you're speaking with spirit, like, okay, how can I communicate what you're showing me to this person who can't visualize it?
I wonder if you could, because of course we know I don't do readings, so could you, because I know before every reading you should meditate briefly or whatever, to protect yourself and such, and ask spirit for guidance. I wonder if you could even ask them to show you or give the message to you the way that they could receive it, who you're giving a reading for.
Yeah, how best to communicate this message.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea because you don't know. And that might make you a better psychic, because, even though the more readings you do and you get more affirmation that you're spot on, you still got to try to keep ego in the back.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And not get all tied up with, I'm good. Oh, I got that right. That kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Right. Which is human nature. So I think it's a great idea to, please show me how best to communicate with this person the message that you want them to hear, so that they can receive it.
Yeah.
Because I've had readings where I'm like, I don't know why, I'm just supposed to tell you this. I don't know why I'm seeing M&Ms, but I'm seeing M&Ms. And then that there's a story behind it. So it's so many times we get a hit psychically that we're trying to put a spin on it to make it work for what we think it is.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Hot cocoa is grandma. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe this person didn't have a grandma that had made hot cocoa, because not all grandmas, but maybe it has a different memory. Going ice skating with a friend when they were little, or, conjuring up something like that. But we need to be careful not to put our spin on someone's reading.
Yeah, right.
And I usually preface this with, okay, I'm being told this, I don't know why. Mm-hmm. You tell me. Because, for one thing, your spin's going to have nothing to do with their life. Your life lessons are different from someone else's life lessons. So when you hear one thing, you're gonna put it together with your life lessons, your life experiences. Well, someone else has different experiences and life lessons, so that could be something different for them. I think it's a good practice to do anyway. Kim, that was a great idea, a great suggestion. Ask spirit to help me to be able to communicate the message to this person the way it is. I think doing, getting into your psychic toolbox and trying to do exercises with your tools is a wonderful way to develop your abilities if you have aphantasia. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's different degrees of aphantasia.
Right, exactly.
So it's not a you got it or you don't. Everybody can have a little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where, okay, I'm really struggling developing my clairvoyance. Well, A, you just could be putting too much pressure on yourself. Or B, you just can't see it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how it is.
Right.
How you're wired. Just because you're wired so you can't do that, then the focus doesn't go on that. Well, what can you do? what is your good spidey sense? Everybody has one Claire that's stronger than the rest. Whether you're willing to communicate that to yourself and allow yourself that. But we all have one that comes through more than another. Just like your psychic toolbox. We all have one that we like more than another, which is usually the one that resonates with you, easiest to do and type thing. Someone doesn't want to take out their tarot deck and do a Celtic reading, which takes 10 cards,
Yeah.
To do it. Whereas the pendulum, you're like, okay, here's my question,
Right.
But also keep in mind with your toolbox, if you don't get the answer you're looking for, that is still an answer.
Well, that's true.
Well, just like, my friend who did the psychic reading, she didn't get the answer she wanted, but she got lots of answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I never shared the podcast with her. I she knows I don't like to give hugs, and she's a hugger, but she's an undiagnosed empath.
Mm-hmm.
She's absorbing stuff all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, and I don't like to hug people because I don't want that chaotic energy that I now have to clear. So one day I gave her a hug because she was going through something really bad. She goes, oh my gosh, you just hugged me. I said, yeah, I don't expect that all the time. So when she said that, she was told she was an empath, I went, oh, well, I'll share you some of my podcasts, episodes on empaths. And she's like, oh, okay. And you can tell she's like, what is she talking about? So I sent them to her. I don't know if she's listened to them, but I sent them to her, and it's up to her.
Yeah, true.
She may not be ready for that development.
Yep.
I know the first time someone told me I was an empath, I'm like, right, okay. All right, Julie. Whatever that is, it's kind of like, whatever. And then she's like, well, don't you feel, she goes, well, how do you feel when you see a old house that's falling apart? And I said, well, it's sad. She goes, right, it's a house. Why do you feel sad about a house? And I said, because it's sad. And she goes, because you're an empath. You're feeling the house's energy. And, I'm like, whatever, Julie. And then I started researching it. And I thought, gosh, I hate it when she's right.
Yeah.
It's like, darn it. And because we all have that sibling thing where your sibling tells you, you need to go ground yourself. I do not need to go ground myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go ground myself. But I'm not going to let her know I did it.
She'll never know I did it.
And that's the funny thing about a psychic family is, I think you need to get grounded. Well, I think you need to get grounded too. It's just kind of like how many families argue about being grounded.
And we're not talking about the punishment grounding.
No, not being grounded, but go ground yourself. Your energy's wonky today. It is not, because that siblings say, that's how siblings are. It's not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's yours, it's off, So if you have a psychic family, that's one of the things you do kind of bicker about is whether or not someone needs grounding or not. But that's what happens. So if you have psychic friends, you may do the same thing. I don't know, but I digress. We're talking about aphantasia. So, one thing about, aphantasia is if you have it, you can still be very successful in life. You can be a very successful psychic. Being a psychic, you get out what you put in, the work, the grounding, it's worth it. It's always nice when you get a hit and you're able to convey a message and you see that person resonate with what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It gives you that sense of I'm helping someone. That's what I'm supposed to be doing, is helping.
Yeah.
Whether I charge for the reading or not. I know a lot of people are like, you have to charge. If you don't charge, then you're not a true psychic. And then sometimes you're just delivering a message someone needs to hear.
Yeah.
And it's not a formal situation. It's just one of those, hey, they're in a bad spot right now and they just need to hear it's okay.
Yep.
Or you need to hear that a deceased one who's being very pushy with me wants you to know that they're very proud of you.
Yeah.
So it's situations like that. But I just thought this was an interesting topic. I told Kim, I said, I don't know if we're going to, how long this episode's going to be, but I didn't want to mix it in with another topic.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very important that we did cover it because, like you said earlier, there could be some very frustrated people out there trying to develop their clairs, and that's one that it just isn't working for them. And that could very well turn someone away from their abilities and shut them down for good. And that's not what we want. We want people to be able to embrace their abilities and use them for whatever spirit has in store for them with their abilities.
Yes. And with the guided medication, the guided meditation is, I have trouble with that myself. Now, I have clairvoyance tendencies, so I know I'm not aphantasious, but I get where I'm overthinking it. It's one of those, picture yourself, on the beach beside this lake. And I'm like, well, how big's the lake? That's where my mind goes. How big's this lake? Well, how big's the beach? Where am I supposed to be at this beach? That's where my mind kicks in, because it's very hard to quiet Carrie's mind to meditate.
Yes.
So guided meditation on that kind of thing doesn't work for me either. And I don't have aphantasia, or I might have a little bit, and that's my one thing, because I can still see clairvoyantly. But my mind just like, well, walk up the pathway. Well, how far up is the pathway? Where's the pathway? I just overthink it, and so that's not my way to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
I do more meditation with the automatic writing, or just trying to clear my mind, sitting here and just talk to me.
Right.
Talk to me or show me what you want to see. So it is not uncommon to struggle with guided meditation.
Right. True.
Do you have better luck with guided meditation than Carrie does?
Oh, I love guided meditations because...
See, it works for you.
Yeah, it works for me. And I can even hear it whenever I'm doing the meditation. I can smell the water. I can hear the water if I'm doing something about a bubbling brook going past me. I can feel a breeze whenever I'm doing it. Yeah, I get very, very into my guided meditations. So that's what I like.
And that's perfect. That's something that's very soothing for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for me, I'm just kind of like, and I'm not the left brain person.
Right?
You're the left brain person. You're like floating down the stream on your back.
Yep.
Just not a care in your world. Okay, I'm not going to drown. I'm just going to embrace this. And I'd be like, I don't know what snakes in that water. I'm not getting in that water, and so that's not something that resonates with me. So just because you do need to, especially if you have aphantasia or a little bit of aphantasia, if that type of meditation isn't working for you, look for another type.
Yeah, exactly.
I loved the Tibetan meditations with the gongs and the bells and the ohms. To me that is my favorite meditation.
I like those too, but guided's my favorite. So
yes. Yes. So if you have aphantasia or you have problem visualizing, that might be the way to go.
Yeah, with the gongs. Yeah, definitely, and the bells.
The gongs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that draws your mind to think about, you're just listening to the bells. And you could just relax, and you're not trying to like, well, what color is the sand on this beach? So it's like,
oh, who knew?
Yeah, so yeah. But you see, that's where finding what resonates with you as a psychic is very important. And sometimes you have to do some deep diving into some things to be like, no, that's not it.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
On one of the Facebook sites I follow, someone brought up that they were their pendulum has refused to work with them.
Huh.
And I'm like, and I rarely comment on things on these sites, because it's just interesting to read the comments. I wonder what they said to this. But I wanted to respond because it's like, well, did you program your pendulum? Last year we did that paranormal convention in Illinois. And I'm sure you remember seeing this. We had one person walk up and my pendulum started swaying.
Yes.
But not all of them.
Right.
Certain ones were swaying. Mm-hmm. And she looked down at the pendulum. She goes, oh. I said, well, evidently you need a pendulum. She goes, I have several. I said, you don't have enough because they're swaying. They're getting your attention. They're talking to you. I said, step away from the table. And she stepped back, and they quieted down. She came back again, and whoa, we started swinging again. I'm like, okay. So this particular person, I wanted to ask, well, did you program it? Have you spent time with it? Did you cleanse it? Did you ask it which way is yes, which way is no, and what do you do when there's no answer? Or what are you asking it?
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't be asking it what you're asking it. So if you're going to use your toolbox, keep that in mind that no answer is an answer. Or maybe you need to get a different pendulum.
I was going to say maybe
that one's not working.
That one maybe is done working with her, and it's time for her to get a different one out of a different stone.
Yeah, and you don't treat your tools as toys.
Yep.
So if you've been kind of flippant with your pendulum and not been, asking, could you work with me, and thanking it when you're done, and then you just might have one acting childish. Because that's how you treat it.
Yep.
But I would definitely say if you have aphantasia, you want to develop your psychic toolbox with what resonates with you. Like tarot, the cards. There's so many images on one tarot card. Well, you don't have to resonate with those. You don't have to look at those images and remember them. You just have to look at what those images are saying. So that might give you more confidence as a psychic with aphantasia to use the tarot cards.
That's true.
Because, you see this particular cups card. What do you see in the background? What's the main focus? You don't have to imagine what this card looks like.
Yeah, because it's just there. You just have to understand what the meaning is for that image.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that might give you more psychic confidence if you have aphantasia than a different type of tool in your toolbox. Like with anything, any kind of education you want to give yourself, sometimes you have to just tailor make it to what you need, or what how you learn, what interests you. Kim's going to be guided meditation all day long. I'm not, because I'm like, God, I can't.
Yeah.
If it's more like envision a bright light, yeah, okay, I'm there. Because it's a bright light. It doesn't require a lot of thought.
You sure you're not asking, well, is it a bright white light or a bright yellow light or?
Well, I'm going to go with bright white light.
Okay.
Because that's what I usually visualize anyway. But there's more limit to questioning it.
Yeah.
I did one guided medication. I keep saying meditation with the Akashic records. And I'm like, okay, and if you're in an elevator, I'm like, okay, it's going up. Okay, well, okay, glass ceiling, you're going to go through that. And I'm like, okay. So far I was good.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't having to picture too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a hallway, and there's doors along this hallway. And I was able, in my mind, those walls were green and the doors were brown. Now, green's not my favorite color. Kim will tell you I don't care for green.
Right.
Very clear. I don't like dark greens and things like that. But that I saw that in my mind. I'm like, okay, this is good. And then, I had to walk up to a door. Well, then it was like, well, which door? There's all these doors. So if I'm like, fine, I'm just going to go in this door. But I had to pause the meditation because the meditation's already in the room. And I'm still figuring out what door I'm going to open. So I was doing pretty, so I had to stop and take a moment. And I'm like, okay. And I had to redo it because, okay, now I know what to expect when I get in here. And now the room is lined with bookcases filled with books, and there's, scrolls and everything. And there's a, podium in the middle, and there's this old book. I'm like, okay, I can do this. It was just kind of like, it was hard. And Kim probably was skipping down the hallway. Oh, here's my door.
As you were giving this description just now, I was visualizing everything. So
See, yeah.
I already picked my door and everything.
Yeah. So it's one of those that if you have a problem with certain types, it's okay. And sometimes, I have to listen to the meditation thing a couple times before I'm going to dive in.
Well, you should do that with any guided meditation or meditation.
Yeah.
You should really listen to it first.
Yeah, listen to it before you do. Yeah. And if any part starts to like, then don't do it.
Right.
Yeah, because there's some weird ones out there.
There's some dark ones out there. I think they might have subliminal messages within them, and you feel it whenever it shifts, whenever you're just screening it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you should, just listen to them resonate. But if you're having problems with it, that doesn't mean you have aphantasia, but it just could be that, like for me, not being left brain, you would think that Kim would be the problem or have the problem with these kind of meditations. And I'd be like skipping down the hallway.
Yeah.
But it's the opposite. I have problems with those meditations. So you might want to do more automatic writing. You may want to do the gongs and the ohms and just whatever resonates with you. Just give yourself some psychic grace.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to be clairvoyant, but it's okay if you cannot be clairvoyant.
Yep. Work on those other ones because they're just as powerful and have as many messages as clairvoyant. It's just they're different.
Yeah, and you're going to learn so much more focusing on the others.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because, when you think about it, you're building the message through if you do the taste and the smell and hearing, all that at one time, you can get messages so many different ways, not just depending on that one image to pop into your head. You know what I mean? I'm not down knocking clairvoyance, I'm just saying there's so much more that you could receive by also opening those others and working with them as well.
Yes. And it depends, again, where you're at in your development.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to go back and revisit the clairs and look at it a different way now because, if you have aphantasia and you didn't know it, well, now you need to go back and re-listen to everything but the clairvoyance.
Right, exactly.
And possibly go back and listen to the empaths. Because if you've got high intuition, you probably have a high empath level as well.
Right.
And, you can kind of tailor your development to that.
Right.
Okay. Well, Kim, do you have anything else on aphantasia?
No, I think we covered everything that I had in my research on it. It was very, very interesting, very enlightening doing that research.
Yeah, because it's one of those topics that who knew?
Right.
That was even out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, PsychicBent listeners, for tuning in for this episode. And we hope that you enjoy it.
I agree.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye. May your light shine bright.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, Psychic Bent. If you enjoyed Psychic Bent, please like, follow, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We can be reached on Facebook at PsychicBent Podcast. Our email address is psychicbent1@gmail.com. May your light shine bright.